Pessoal, a nossa próxima sessão ela vai ser conduzida em espanhol e em inglês. Então a gente também alerta que quem prefira ouvir a tradução simultânea, fiquem à vontade para pegar os radinhos de tradução. The next session will be in Spanish and English, so if you'd like to listen to the translation from Spanish, also feel free to get one of the receivers from the table there. Y la próxima sesión se llevará a cabo en español y inglés, y habrá interpretação simultânea ao português e ao inglês. E para dar continuidade à nossa programação, a gente agora vai para um tema que reflete o amadurecimento e a sofisticação do setor na nossa região aqui da América Latina. O nome do próximo painel é Fusões e Aquisições como Vetor de Escala no iGaming Latino-Americano. Vamos só aguardar um momentinho e a gente já vai fazer a chamada para o próximo. Obrigado, meninas. Perfeito. Então, como dizia, o próximo painel se chama Fusões e Aquisições como Vetor de Escala no iGaming Latino-Americano. Em um cenário de crescimento acelerado, as operações de M&A consolidam-se como um dos principais instrumentos de expansão e de fortalecimento do iGaming aqui na América Latina. E mais do que movimentos estratégicos, essas transações impactam diretamente aspectos fundamentais como o valuation, a governança corporativa, a integração tecnológica e o planejamento de longo prazo. Ao mesmo tempo, elas ganham protagonismo com os desafios inerentes desse processo de integração pós-aquisição, as particularidades regulatórias entre diferentes jurisdições e o papel cada vez mais central do Brasil como eixo estruturante desse movimento na região. Esse debate convida a gente a uma reflexão sobre a estratégia, a consolidação e o futuro de mercado que se torna a cada dia mais dinâmico, mais competitivo e mais globalizado. Nós convidamos agora os participantes deste painel a subirem ao palco. Senhor Fernando Garita, que é executivo com mais de 20 anos de experiência na indústria de jogos e tecnologia, com atuação e expansão de mercados na América Latina e Ásia, consultoria e planejamento estratégico. Senhor Fernando Garita, por favor. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome, sir. Ele é Managing Partner e Co-Founder do Kabata Group, além de atuar como CBO e membro do board da MWPay. Ele também é fundador da GCS Gaming Consulting e cofundador da Enchanted Bets, da betikey.ai, participando ativamente do desenvolvimento do ecossistema de iGaming aqui na região. Ele foi reconhecido entre os Host 50 Gaming Intelligence e listado entre os top 5 líderes da indústria de gaming online pela SAGSI, além de ter sido finalista do Leader of the Year da SBC Latam de 2023. Também contamos com o senhor Ramiro Atucha, o CEO e fundador da Atucha Strategic Advisory. Senhor Ramiro Atucha, por favor. Muchas gracias. O senhor Ramiro Atucha é um executivo com mais de 30 anos de experiência nos setores globais de gaming e tecnologia e, ao longo da sua carreira, ele liderou empresas em diferentes fases de crescimento, contribuiu para o desenvolvimento do mercado de jogos online e regulamentos na Europa, nos Estados Unidos e na América Latina, atuando na expansão internacional, parcerias estratégicas e desenvolvimento corporativo. Também contamos com o senhor Ivan Meyer, Managing Partner da Astralis Capital Management. Mr. Meyer, please. Welcome, sir. Hi. O Sr. Meyer passou mais de 10 anos em Wall Street, atuando com um banco de investimentos em mercados institucionais de ações e venture capital. O Sr. Meyer obteve um AB em governo americano pela Georgetown University e um MBA em finanças pela Kelley School of Business da Indiana University. E para conduzir esse debate, nós temos a honra de convidar o Sr. Bernardo Freire. E, na verdade, ele estava ainda num painel. É isso, produção. O senhor Bernardo ainda não estará conosco, mas nós vamos começar, de qualquer forma, a nossa sessão sem o senhor Bernardo. Ele está atuando em um outro palco e daqui a pouquinho ele vai se juntar aqui conosco. Mr. Bernardo is unfortunately on another stage. He's going to be joining us shortly, but we can get started without him at this point. Então, gostaria de passar a palavra aqui aos nossos panelistas. Thank you very much. I wish you all a great panel. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Well, good afternoon to all. It's a pleasure to be here again, and there's a very interesting topic. The idea will be delivering you guys with exchanging some experience between some different markets in the acquisition and everything. As we were talking with Evans, who is from US, they got a lot of experience what is happening right there for so many years. As well, Ramiro from Europe and other markets like Latin America. Ramiro's from Argentina, as well like me. I'm a Costa Rican. So we got a different perspectives, and we already accumulate some experience in different situations and what is happening. So the idea will be delivered, you guys, and please be active. If you got any question anytime, please let us know. The idea is to try to explain a little bit what is happening behind all this market acquisition. Especially right now, Brazil was very trending between last year and this year. Latin America now is very active. Europe as well. USA, I guess, Evans, you can explain a little bit more, is in a kind of a valley situation. So 2-3 years ago, they were so high, so valuable, everybody want to go there. And so maybe we can start by there. Let's start by Evans. And Evans, you can share with us or with the people a little bit what the experience right there about how the different of the models of acquisition do you running in US against Latin America and Europe?
So I'll start by saying there's an amazing book by a Venezuelan economist called Carlota Perez that talks about just the overall cycles. And so what I've seen throughout my career is there's this hype cycle, which has happened, here in Brazil over the last 3 to 4 years. As we move from gray to regulated markets, everyone gets excited, everyone starts coming in, everyone thinks it's going to be the next big boom market, and that excitement builds, and then you deal with the reality. The reality generally then settles. I think we're in that settling period now of trying to figure out kind of where the market is, where it's going, and then you start to see M&A, then you start to see really accretive deals come through the marketplace, but it's not until you've kind of hit that bottoming out. And I think we're in that period here. We saw that in the US. So post-PASPA in 2018, you had, everything became, from gray to regulated, and the ability to go to the public markets. FanDuel and DraftKings were two of the biggest companies, with a good base of sports betting from daily fantasy that easily pivoted into the regulated markets.
Well, you mentioned the fantasy. That was a very nice way to getting in the real money business because they were very, very strong. And after they decide to move, to go forward.
Well,
how was
similar to
that
here.
situation?
Similar to here, with everything in the gray markets, you were able to build your user base without really having to pay for it like you do post-regulation.
Yeah.
And so DraftKings and FanDuel were able to do that. We saw the same thing in Canada, in Toronto, and Ontario. And we're seeing it here, and it's like, it's hard to become a regulated company and now build your user base, with the regulations.
Well, actually, you mentioned Ontario. Ontario was in a pretty equal situation. I remember when they launched to regulate, just some operators, they tried to apply to Ontario. But there was I like to compare Ontario situation when there is something happening here in Brazil, because in Ontario, we have the situation, Ontario was in the process of regulated, but on the side, there was other states, they don't go in the same way. So the people sometimes decide because the taxes or prices keep out of this kind of regulation and be there. Here is happening something similar. Let's talk about...
Slower.
Exactly, but we are talking about most federal against estadual license. It's pretty much like that. Well, it's interesting. And Ramiro, Ramiro is Argentinian. He lives in Europe. Well, maybe you can talk a little bit about what happened in Spain as well. Because remember, in Spain, we are talking about 6-7 years ago, and compare what is happening right now in the last 2 years in Latin America.
Yeah, correct. So the main element that I'm seeing right now in Latin America, as you well said, there's been an element of a lot of interest prior to the regulation, a lot of FOMO. After the regulation, reality kicking in. And the feeling that I have is that operators that were from the pre-regulation are a lot more disappointed than the ones that recently entered. Because of course, before, it was Christmas, right? They didn't have to pay any taxes, they didn't have to abide by any regulation. Now they have to do that. And of course, it's more challenging. Now, I think that the right scale is given by the operators that are just coming to this market with experience in other, and their view is a bit more positive about how the market is behaving. Spain is a different story because, it's over-regulated. It's a very consolidated market, and it is even, I would say, unattractive for local operators. So local operators stay there, but they're trying to grow in other markets, going to Spain, going to Peru, going to Argentina. That's a big element to that as well.
Yeah, actually, well, yesterday we were in another panel, me and Ramiro, with a very good colleague from here, Luis Felipe Maya, who is a lawyer, very well recognized. And he do a lot of M&As here in Brazil. And one of the topics we talk about, maybe sometimes the process are different, is how Brazil is sometimes you find so many intermediary people. So it's not like US. You have to have a specific license to trade the situation. You have to work with different companies. I be working with some USA boards or companies who dedicated to that. So what do you think about that one, Evans? Because in a process, in a very regulation process way like you have in US, and compared with Latin American model, who is technically, there is a lot of intermediaries. You're talking with 3-4 guys before to get the right owner.
Sorry, adding to that, you come from Wall Street, and you've been living for the past years here in Brazil, and living all that transition. I think that the clash and the cultural gap, not so much US-Brazil, but on the way Wall Street does business and here business are done, must have been important.
Yeah, it's very different, and I think when you look at the move from pre-regulation to regulation, the areas before you figure out who the ultimate owner is. That's hard to take to your board in the U.S. and say, listen, we're coming in. This is going to be a clean sweep. We'll bring and integrate the companies into our global platform. So it's a little bit different. But that being said, I do think there is massive opportunity here once the U.S. starts to kind of find its normal path. And the U.S. operators, as we were discussing before this, is they can't stay out of their own way. They've been fighting all, sports betting is only legal in 38 states out of 50. iCasino is only legal in 8 states out of 50. So, and the states it's not a national, it's state by state by state. So even if you have a platform, it's hard to basically connect all those. You have to log into MGM Indiana, MGM Kentucky, MGM New York. So they don't make it simple. And that's why I think,
It's not as standard as we think.
No, and it's very piecemeal across, each state in the U.S. That's why I think, you look to the prediction markets, like that's one platform across the entirety of the country. And I think that's why they're doing so well, let alone going after sports betting in California, Texas, and Georgia, which are currently illegal. So I think you look to that as a model of, the U.S. has a lot of runway in order to rebuild the balance sheets, frankly, before they start looking outside for real big M&A from the big players.
Well, we talked a little bit already about the environment against the regulation, but maybe you guys, Ramiro, you can start. Let's try to describe to the people how is the usual process for a Latin American acquisition, and then Evans can explain, and later we can compare how is the process. Well, Ramiro was participating recently in a couple of acquisitions, so maybe you can explain how is the ABC to get in, to access the buyer or investor? How is the process? Well, you were in that, so you can describe very well.
That's an interesting point because one thing that I've noticed is a big difficulty for American European companies to acquire companies in Brazil or in Latin America, but especially in Brazil. I think that the standards of KYC and due diligence that are held by an American company are very different from the ones used in Latin America, and that's why it's interesting you being here. You living in Brazil and getting to understand how things work, because the fact that you have that you do not comply with the standard due diligence doesn't mean that the company is dodgy, or doesn't mean that it's not a suitable company to be acquired. It's just that sometimes the same thing is being called differently, And that has been a challenge all over the place, I believe.
Yeah, from a venture perspective, I think when we're looking at a company, whether it's Brazil, whether it's in Argentina, whether it's in the US or areas of Europe, it's about the ultimate size of the market, how these people are going to, attack the market, how they're going to be stewards of our capital, and then ultimately, how are we going to get an exit? Because we're here to make our investors money, and that's one of the more difficult questions to ask down here, because if you deal with just relying on M&A as the ultimate exit, it's going to be difficult. I think there are certain companies, I think Hey de Pataco being one of them, that when they launched down here, they basically set up a very clean structure, and that has attracted international capital. I think that's different from a lot of local Brazilian companies going after moving from gray market to regulated markets. I think they did that with the eye of getting acquired by a global player. Let's see how that goes. But I think it is that, and it's like if you're looking at something purely in the gray market, which we look at, as a venture capitalist, I love the movement from black to gray to regulated, and there's a lot of value captured here before it gets to the regulated state, particularly in the US, in areas that are not necessarily regulated yet. So you look at the sweeps casinos, you look at skill-based games online that can go to 50 states. That's wildly impactful, but you know what? Those companies better be spitting off cash as they go along, because all the investors need a return on their money, because if you do a DCF on the company, the terminal value is most likely zero.
Yeah. Well, actually happened here in Brazil. Before the regulation or in the process, the prices and the valuations were, technically with metrics, but not sure what will be happening in the next 6 months, for example. So many companies, they find a way how to sell in so much money, but when they turn in the regulation situation, everything changed. The return of investment was so far away from that point, but it's a situation. Now, let's see, guys, from the perspective, I'm an owner of the company. I'm running already, I'm operating here in Brazil or Latin America. What I need to take care or take a look when I'm going to look at a group or for investment or for acquisition, what do you think, guys? What exactly? So give me the tips you think you can give it to the people who run in business already. They want to or just grow or going for sale.
Well, there's an element that sometimes we miss a lot in Latin America, which is the fact that building a company that can go through an M&A process, it's not so much more expensive than building it the wrong way. Now, going back and rebuilding it once you did it. So there's a corporate structure, there's how you organize the assets, is knowing ahead of time that they will want to know the UBO. So, that's something that really needs to be planned, especially when we're talking about a market that's coming from unregulated. So if we're talking about a market that's coming from unregulated, it's very difficult to pass a formal due diligence by a public American company, by the owner. So that needs to be acknowledged from the start of the company that acquires a license, that invests in building. And at the same time, there's been a big element of considering the size of the market and the potential size of the market into the valuation, but not tying to real valuation metrics, especially here in Brazil. Now, reality is after the regulation came in, all the revenues that they were having from unregulated, they went down, and all the costs were up. Of course, I mean, the multiplier is higher because we're talking about regulated now, right?
No, I think that's the case. I think you look at certain international operators. Like we had a portfolio company that I was mentioning that recently got bought a majority stake by Allwyn. This was a daily fantasy 2.0 play in the US. And Allwyn's done a great job of building a globalized platform through acquisition or majority stakes in companies in a variety of markets. I know they have several huge investments here in Brazil, in Europe, OPAP, that transaction just went through. And then they brought PrizePicks in-house for their first real kind of platform play in the US. There hasn't been, I thought there would be a big march of US capital acquirers come down. That hasn't been the case, but not to say it won't be the case. I think there is a lot of cleaning up of strategy, of structures, in order to make yourself available and ready for a bake-off or a large investor to come in. So I think that will happen. I just think the boards in the U.S. are fighting bigger battles right now, and they're exploring stuff international. But I think if your share price has gone down in DraftKings' sake, over 50% in the last 6 to 8 months, it's hard to go out and use that capital now for acquisitions. It's hard to raise money on the back of that in the debt markets for acquisitions when your stock's in a free fall. And Flutter has been in the same case, and that's largely been because of the prediction markets in the U.S. But it's also DraftKings. We were saying DraftKings has burned $6 billion when it's always profitability is one step further, one step further, one step further. It's hard to go out and use that capital to make significant acquisitions.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that you mentioned, a good friend from US, they told me, it's the new coin on the block, they say, like the old guys, predicted markets. How is affecting the acquisition market in the case of US and, well, in Latin America is a little bit more new, but how affecting in US?
Well, if I may just interrupt you for a second, Mr. Bernardo Freire has arrived and is going to be joining us on
Please,
stage.
Bernardo, pura vida.
Please welcome Bernardo Freire.
Good.
How's it going? Well, to your question on
That's not fair. He got a nice, this is a nice setup, not like us.
Top. A new kid.
The new kid on the top now.
So for prediction markets in the U.S., and this goes, I think we've largely been discussing more the operator role here and consolidation on the operator side. What I see in the U.S. is, I don't know how these valuations are getting set. Raising $1 billion at $22 billion valuation for Kalshi, I've seen their numbers, it does not make sense. Particularly when you factor in the regulatory risk being, 25% that they continue doing where they're doing. They're going to fight the Supreme Court. They're going to fight the next administration. Those are massive, massive risks to the core of the business. But where I see on the M&A side coming through is they're able to raise that type of money. That money's feeding the entire ecosystem. So if you think of the top of a tree, all the money's coming in up here, and then the leaves are coming down throughout. And so they're going after companies who can do customer acquisition. They're going after companies building tech that can plug into their platforms. I think as we spoke, we've seen a couple companies building using prediction as the mechanics behind slots and behind table games. Whether it's tick of Bitcoin, tick of S&P, like you can actually use the future ticks as effectively the mechanics behind real money casino. And so to come to those valuations, 22 billion for Kalshi and approximately 20 billion for Polymarket, like you have to assume they're going after that market too, and I think they will.
Yeah, no, nice. Well, in that way, in that perspective, in the legal way, well, Bernardo has a lot of experience. He's one of the most recognized lawyers here in Brazil, in gaming as well. So maybe you can share with us a little bit about that, the situation in how the predicted markets they are in certain way. I don't know if hiding the situation or using to be the way to operate in a other way.
I think that we were discussing this on the other panel now. Brazil, I think they're not going to hide the problem. They are going to regulate the prediction market. We had a lesson with the gaming, the betting regulation, that without regulation we had a major problem. So that we spent 4 years to solve. So I honestly believe that we are going to regulate the prediction market. Not this year, because election year. This year, I believe that, I think that's like a common sense that when we talk about prediction on market, CVM is going to regulate it the first moment. And sports betting, it's sports betting. You have to have a license. So
Yeah.
this is the point of view now. But we have here in Brazil, we have the state license that they can use something different. You can, I think that the prediction of the day-to-day things, this is a problem because the betting law forbids it. So it says you only can bet on sports events. So this would major change legislation, sorry. But I think that they are not going to postpone it. They are going to try to solve it fast, quickly.
You think before land-based? Before land-based?
Mute.
I think that before land-based casino, we are going to have at least the regulation of the sports events by the secretary of the government, and CVM is going to do something regarding the market. So I do believe that even before the casinos. That's a major problem. We have been for 2 years trying to choose. No, the Bill of Law is from 1991, the land-based casino Bill of Law, and we are like, I am from '83, so I am 42 now, and we don't have the conclusion of the situation. But
Well, and there's an element there on all the changes that are being implemented that also affects M&A. I mean, not being able to count on, solid, stable rules to just produce an M&A, like the tax base, is very difficult for any European or American company, and I'm certain it's affecting the M&A process as well, right?
Yeah, it's hard, again, going back to modeling, it's hard to model out what you can pay when you don't know, massive levers. You can, play with them in the model, but, if tax bases or tax increases are going to go up significantly, like, you're going to pay less.
no, I didn't, Evan. I did the first M&A here in Brazil. I was advisor to Bet Nacional on Flutter Bet Nacional deal. I know that you mentioned it in the beginning. And then all the math that they had to do, they said, look, are you sure that's going to be like that? I always say, look, in Brazil, even the PES is unsure. So I don't know if it's going to be like that. We have, and this is a question that I would like to do to all of you, that in Brazil we have now some political attacks to the gaming industry. How does this affect the interests of the European American companies?
I'll start with that. I think, you're seeing an increase in heightened political awareness across the globe, whether it's marketing regulations in Europe. I think there's a massive, push here. I think there will be pressure, as we're seeing in Europe and the U.S., on soccer advertising, on stadium advertising, on jersey advertising. Like, it's been the easiest way to get your brand and build your brand out there. Expensive, but an easy way to build that following. I think U.S. will follow Europe's as far as just regulating down the amount of noise from the gaming companies, and it'll probably come down here as well. And then politicians, it's an easy lever to pull for them, right? They'll find a sensitive ear with the electorate, whether it's people who are just anti-gambling, or on the other side, it's like, okay, gambling's always been in the kind of back rooms of places. Everyone's admitted that it's going on, but it's never been as in your face as it has been across the globe in the last 5 to 10 years. And I think that wakens a lot of people up to, okay, is this a massive societal harm? We're in an industry where I invest in this industry. I grew up in this industry. Like, it's one of those, like, can we regulate luxury handbags for women? Like, it's the same thing. It's like luxury good consumption. Is that necessarily good if you're going into credit card debt to buy luxury goods? And like, it's not apples to apples comparison, but frankly, like, it's similar thinking, and the gambling industry is just it's a much easier target for politicians to go after and build consensus.
Let's talk about taxes. How affect the market of acquisitions?
Yeah, regarding, just want to mention to Evan, we have 36 bills of law regarding advertisement in Brazil. 36, they are discussing all at the same time. So it's something unbelievable. And taxing in Brazil, I joke that when I was working in the regulation, I had the first meetings before the law was sanctioned by President Lula. And then we had some meetings to get the regulations, I think we have more than 17 regulations in Brazil. And then in September of 2024, we have the first attack. That's the Supreme Court. They tried to say that the law was completely unconstitutional. So after that, we started having the attacks on the tax. So first one was to change the contribution from 12 to 24%. And then we had the CD bet is also, that was to put from the 15% on the deposit of the client. And then we had like another one that tried to put 36% of tax. So, and now we have the SIM tax yet. That's going to be decided.
Yeah, definitely it's a big thing. In my case, in Kawata Group, we recently accompanied a customer, one of the biggest operators in Europe. We make a market entry project for Brazil market. So we take one by one, small point, details, all the needs the company will be there. I collaborate with some attorneys, local. So we do like a 4 months project of only market entry. And at the final, even with the budget, we close to be and run properly in Brazil. My customer decide to put everything on hold because since when we start the project and when we finish to deliver the market entry plan, the budget go increase in taxes, talking or return on investment. Now will be even in 2 years, so they decide to stop. And it's a big company. So definitely, I guess, that instability of the political and tax situation definitely affect. In my case, affect. It was a very nice project, something big, a big company, but they decide to stop because of that.
But it's clearly political, right? Because, I mean, if you look globally, what happens whenever taxes are raised above a reasonable level, whenever restrictions happen, whenever regulated operators have less content available than unregulated operators. You see, unregulated grow and tax collection fall. So it's not just tax collection or protecting the players. I mean, the other day when Lula was talking about, closing the regulated casinos. No, actually, he was saying closing the casinos. You cannot close the casinos. I mean, you're just moving people to unregulated. And it's hard to believe that they don't understand this. Because they're smart people, and we have examples of what has been happening in Germany, in Argentina, in every country where regulation, what's happening now in the UK. I mean, it's hard to believe that they are not considering all those examples when doing it. It's clearly political.
Yeah, in the UK, it's a perfect example. So basically, they went after, there's a massive budget deficit, a budget gap. What's an easy target? The gaming industry. What they don't understand is the second and third derivative effects, which is effectively gambling companies can move with their feet. They can shut down their operations. They fire people. That actually decreases the overall tax basis. And so, and people have the ability with a casino in your pocket via a cell phone, you can play offshore. And it's okay, if you want to put an end to the industry, that's fine. But as you said, people can vote with their feet and will go elsewhere.
And offshore is not, a dark alley. It's large casinos that are regulated in other places that can offer more games, more return to these players. I mean, look at Germany. I haven't seen a nation as proud to pay their taxes and comply with the law as Germany. And even there, unregulated gambling, illegal gambling, is growing. I mean, achieving that as a regulator.
It's not just growing. We are talking Germany and even France. We are talking more than 60% is illegal market right now and growing. Because of that, it's so high taxes, so hard to operate. So the operators or left, and the illegal take advantage of that. And the people never going to start to play. They're just going to find a way how to go in different ways. But well, this is something.
Yeah, and the thing is, you're correct that we had the possibility to see everything that went wrong in the other countries. So
and did it again.
And then what we are doing? Let's do it again. So, for example, the President Lula's idea to ban the online gaming. We said, look, one country that did that? China. The country that bets the most? China. And then the advisor say, look, but that's not our problem. It is our problem.
We're going to block the IPs.
Yeah, we're going to block the IPs. You can't block the IPs until now with the legal companies financing the blocks. Imagine if the legal companies stop financing the blocks. So I think that this political situation, and in Brazil, you have a bit of religion also, a religious situation. That's not the major, most important thing, but it hits the...
In an election year, it's very important.
No. So
you have to talk to your base. And what we've seen globally is one of the largest players in the US, who's no longer in the US, global operator, they were very anti-LVS. Sheldon was very anti anything online, touching online gaming. And they did a lot of work down here for physical casinos with the view that let's keep online at bay. And it never went anywhere. No. And they're out of the US entirely right now and making a lot of money in Macau and Singapore. But their entire ethos is basically, it's hard to make that separation. And if a country goes in and has, or a state in the United States case, has significant, iGaming presence, it's hard to make it in the casino. And there is a lot of cannibalization. People still go to the big destination casinos for a reason, but then, if they can play at home, maybe their budget's less.
In Brazil, we know that some major players were waiting the land-based casino, like Sheldon was a good example. But I think that we had a good moment that we could see what everyone did before. But also we did something different. That we are maybe the only country in the world that began with the live casinos before the land-based. So that's a challenge somehow.
Yeah.
So, but I think that with the I think that we will control it until the election. I think that we're not going to have something that like a ban or something like that. But I honestly think that if we solve it, we are going to have a lot of M&As in Brazil, mostly next year.
Well, what do you guys think about the alternative M&As going public? Do you see a market for local casinos, local online casinos to go public in this market and potentially in the US?
I think that in Brazil, I know that some players want to do it. In Brazil, we will have some players that are like Flutter, that's abroad. I think Bet365 and 10, I believe. But in Brazil, I believe that someone is going to try it. One of the top 5, we're going to try it.
Well, it's happening with the banks. We got recently, of course, Nubank already, and now PicPay.
PicPay.
Recently, how much was you're there? So maybe you can explain how was that process as well, because you were 2 months ago.
Yeah,
Right.
PicPay, I think we are going to launch by this week, maybe, mostly, or next week, I don't remember. And but we had to inform in US and Nasdaq of the Joga Juntos, the name of the brand, and it's an open company also, of course. But
Yeah, no, and also I was talking with them, and if we go for maybe not in the gambling for now, but talking about the e-commerce technology and everything. We are talking the companies who get in public in the U.S. from Brazil is running up to more than 8% of the whole companies they are getting public in the U.S. So that means something. I guess sooner or later from Brazil definitely will be a strong product to showing up right there about gambling or even predicted markets. I know already there are like 2-3 guys already they are up and running his own platforms. So it's an option.
But I think that even PicPay or Nubank, they have other business, and I think that 100% betting company, I see some players that would do it. I do believe that some players would do it, but they are waiting to see what's the political situation. So I don't.
That is another big thing will be happening. I don't know if everybody knows, but technically the next year will be a politic year. So definitely, and start already. There is a lot of dirty campaign against the gaming industry, using us as a politic coin. So that is something definitely will be affect so many things. So the information is not the properly way. I know there is a lot of associations. They are trying to make a clarification and take an action against some politics. They try to, throw away us as the bad guys, and when the real problem is in another place.
Actually listing, the issues generated by the unregulated casinos or for the lack of regulated casinos to the regulated industry. Regulated industry is actually the solution to the problems that they are listing there.
Do you guys feel in general, so in most large kind of developed markets, post the initial rush, you have consolidation into the top 5-6 players, then you have the long tail. Like we've seen in the US, the long tail really doesn't survive. Like you can't get by on 1, 2, 3% market share. Like you can never really align the cost of being, a functioning, viable large business. Therefore, going back to the M&A, do you think there's a massive difference in the user bases between the tails and the 3 to 4 to 5 big players? Do you think there's a lot of overlap of customers?
Yeah, definitely. But something, I was operator here for some years, and definitely the customers, even here in Brazil, they got accounts in 3, 4, 5 companies. So they are running, they are playing smart. Customer service is a big thing. If they don't feel comfortable, if something happened with just payment or even the product, So if you have 20 good options and you got 2 or 3 amazing options, where do you go? You go to the nicest ones. And well, I guess yes, overlapping will be happening. And the biggest challenge for these small companies will be some of them only survive, and other ones, they already lost the fight. And I guess
They just don't know it yet.
well, yeah. You could be agree with me. In these next 6 months in Brazil, we are going to see how who lost the fight, they will start showing up. And actually, there is a lot of market affected right now in Brazil, who is the manpower, the people. So there is a lot of people who's closing companies. There is a lot on the market. It's not enough companies to acquire or take these people. And there is people who is running from the gaming industry again to other industries.
Now, you have cases like Mexico where Caliente dominates, and you still got new operators appearing in Mexico and being competitive and growing and making a profit. So even in that dramatic case where, of course, I mean, different to the US, because I mean the cost of licensing and compliance there is so high, in Mexico it's a bit easier. I guess the element is there, right? Even in a context like Mexico, where I think Caliente has 60-70% of the market, the rest can still make, some profit. I think that the element there is the compliance cost and the license cost, right?
And I think from an M&A perspective, like if there's a regional play, you're going to see a more Spanish-based play. It's hard to integrate an existing platform in Mexico with Brazil. And like building those, like that integration, you often lose basically any synergy you expected to have, from an M&A. Like it's hard. Compliance, regulatory, legal, they're different worlds. And I think that's what's holding back a lot of the bigger kind of more pan-regional acquisition plays.
Yeah, I think Brazil has one difference maybe from US is that we have like the Northeast is very different from the South. So you can have a betting company that only works and it's one of the major in the Northeast, and you have in Brazil, and one that's the major one in the South. So you have like Betano, that's now Brazil, Bet Nacional, Sporting Bet, Bet 365. But these regions, maybe you're going to have some M&As to make your company become national. So, but I am already seeing some minor M&As, like smaller companies are not going to survive. I think. Well, not maybe next year, but I see we have 85 licenses, I say, now. I think Brazil is going to be bigger than the US, probably, but maybe you're going to stop in 35, 30. We have a friend that says that's 28. It says that's his number, but I think that it's going to be something like that. You're going to have major companies, M&As of major companies, but the smaller ones are going to or are going to disappear, or they're going to be bought for a little money.
Well, something we talked yesterday in another panel was about that one. There is right now more fusions between companies, even local Brazilian companies, than acquisitions. So it's another situation. There is companies, they are not going to survive. They'll sell or they try to save something, and they go forward and find another Brazilian colleague to try to or merge or sell everything. But behind the super acquisition is more fusions. Locally right now is happening here.
There's an element that's also affecting. I always say that our industry, for a long time in this kind of markets, has kind of been hunting in a zoo. I mean, whatever you invest in marketing, whatever you're treating your players, whatever product you're putting out there, they're still going to play. And now it's getting more competitive. I mean, the cost that you used to have, I don't know, to sponsor a football team before versus now, cost of acquisition is going high a lot, and they're going to need to start optimizing all those processes. And there's a lack of training in those things.
And I think
Now
that's where you'll end up seeing, some decent M&A happen in the space. It's basically product differentiation. How can you actually obtain a new customer better than your competitors? I think there are some interesting startups we're seeing in the US and seeing some down here that, the problem is there are the multiples that a company's willing to pay. If they're 65% of your overall, revenue, you're not going to get the multiple of a true bidding war. Therefore, you need to manage expectations on outcome, but to be connected to and be owned by one of the platforms down here, I think that's a very important way for a lot of smaller B2B companies to actually really drive returns for investors and for their shareholders.
Well, here in Brazil, there is a big thing. Not all the companies take in mind, like when there is an acquisition or going forward in the market, is the retention of the player. In Brazil, it's very expensive to keep the players with you. You have to find a way, a different way, but anyways, it's one of the biggest costs. And beside that one as well, the processing. We got because it's a cultural thing here in Brazil. Normally the players, they deposit in the morning, they play a little bit during the day, and they cash out on the night. So processing way is a high cost as well for the operators, and sometimes doesn't take in mind when they go forward and go and operate in this market. But yes.
And I joke, Fernando, that the first M&A in Brazil was a major one. So everyone that came after said, I want the same thing. So I don't want anything below that what the guys got on Flutter deal. So, and it happened a lot with me. So a lot of clients looked at through some assessment, and I said, look, what happened in the beginning is not going to happen again. You have to know that. And you see, for example, what happened with the football teams was like the money they were paying was not profitable. It wasn't.
Now they came with super discounts, more than 50% off. Yeah. It's like Black Friday now. They are offering the teams for the third part of the money. They show up before. Influencers as well. There was a big group of influencers. They make millions, now there's so many, so the value is,
I think that's it.
Yeah, no, we are running out of time right now. I don't know if there is any questions in the audience. If no, we can go and continue for the next panel. And well, thank you so much, guys, to share here with us.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Pura vida. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bernardo Freire, Fernando Garita, Ramiro Atucha, and Evan Meyer for this excellent discussion. Please stay on the stage for a moment for us to take a picture and for us to give you a small token of our appreciation.